When boxing legends talk about fear, one name still hits differently: Joe Frazier. He wasn't terrifying because he looked flashy. He wasn't terrifying because he talked too much. Joe Frazier was terrifying because once that bell rang, he came forward like a man who refused to be denied. No hesitation, no retreat, no mercy. Every step he took felt like pressure. Every punch felt personal. And that brutal left hook? Fighters didn't just fear getting hit by it. They feared the moment it finally landed. What made Frazier so frightening was not just his power, but his obsession. He could take punishment, keep advancing, and break a man's will right in front of the world. To the fans, he was a warrior. But to the men across the ring, Joe Frazier was something far more dangerous. A nightmare that never stopped coming. Yeah, Joe Frazier was not the kind of fighter who needed theatrics to intimidate people. His danger came from something much deeper: his identity. He fought with a kind of hunger that felt raw, personal, and impossible to slow down. Nicknamed Smokin Joe, Frazier built his reputation on relentless pressure, brutal bodywork, and a style that forced every opponent into a war. He stayed low, moved his head, stepped inside, and made the ring feel smaller with every second. There was no comfort against him, no easy breathing room. What made him truly terrifying was that he seemed completely willing to suffer just to make sure you suffered more. Legends didn't just respect Joe Frazier because he won fights. They respected him because he brought a level of intensity that could shake even the toughest men in boxing. But what made Joe Frazier truly terrifying was the kind of pressure that didn't just hurt fighters physically, it broke them mentally. From the opening bell, Frazier fought like a man closing in on his target with bad intentions. He didn't waste movement. He didn't give opponents time to think. He kept bobbing, weaving, stepping forward, cutting off space, and forcing exchanges that many fighters simply were not built to survive. Against Joe Frazier, the ring started to feel smaller every round. That was the real fear. It wasn't just that he hit hard, it was that he never stopped coming. Even when he got hit clean, even when punishment was coming back at him, Frazier would keep marching forward as if pain meant nothing. And for the man across from him, that created a different kind of panic. Because if your best shots could not stop him, then what exactly would? His body attack made things even worse. Frazier didn't just headhunt. He punished ribs, arms, and lungs until opponents lost their balance, their breath, and eventually their belief. That constant pressure forced mistakes. It drained confidence. It turned skill into survival. By the middle rounds, many fighters were no longer trying to win. They were just trying to escape. And that is what separated Joe Frazier from ordinary champions. He didn't just beat men, he made them feel trapped. If Joe Frazier's pressure was the storm, then his left hook was the lightning bolt that made everything truly terrifying. It was not just one of the most famous punches in boxing history, it was a weapon that carried fear with it every second he was in range. Opponents knew it was coming, they studied it, they trained for it. And still, many of them could not stop it. That is what made it so dangerous. Frazier did not need surprise. He had timing, violence, and absolute commitment. The beauty of that punch was in how naturally it came from his style. He would dip low, move his head, inch forward, and make a fighter focus on surviving the pressure. Then suddenly, the hook exploded upward and around the guard with terrifying force. It was compact, fast, and thrown with bad intentions. One clean shot could change the entire fight. One mistake, 1 second of hesitation, and everything was different. But the real fear was psychological. Once a fighter felt that hook, or even saw it barely miss, doubt started creeping in. Every exchange became dangerous. Every close-range moment felt like a trap. That punch forced men to fight nervous, and nervous fighters make mistakes. Joe Frazier understood that. His left hook was not just power, it was control. It made elite fighters cautious, uncomfortable, and vulnerable. In Joe Frazier's hands, that single punch became a nightmare that followed opponents from the first bell to the last. What made Joe Frazier even more frightening was that he could do this to great fighters, not just ordinary ones. Plenty of boxers looked dangerous against weak opposition. Frazier looked terrifying against men who were supposed to be fearless. That is a completely different level of intimidation. The deeper the fight went, the more uncomfortable he made elite opponents feel. His pace was punishing, his presence was suffocating, and his determination was exhausting to deal with. Frazier had a way of dragging world-class fighters into the kind of fight they did not want. Technical boxers wanted space, rhythm, and control. Joe took that away. Punchers wanted respect at mid-range. Joe walked through that. Smart fighters wanted time to think. Joe gave them none. He turned high-level boxing matches into gritty, painful tests of survival, and once that happened, reputation stopped mattering. Names stopped mattering. All that mattered was whether you could stand there and keep dealing with Smokin' Joe round after round. That is why legends speak about him with such serious respect. They understood how rare it is for one fighter to impose his will so completely. Joe Frazier did not need perfect conditions to be effective. He brought the same danger every time: pressure, pain, and absolute refusal to back down. Mind against him, even the best in the world could be made to look vulnerable. And that is when a fighter stops being merely great and starts becoming terrifying. What made Joe Frazier truly terrifying was not just what he could do physically, it was the mindset behind it all. Some fighters get discouraged when a fight becomes painful. Some slow down when they taste resistance. Joe Frazier seemed to come alive in those moments. The harder the fight became, the more dangerous he looked. That is a frightening trait in any boxer because it tells your opponent something simple and brutal. This man is not going away. Frazier fought with a level of mental commitment that legends instantly recognized. He was willing to absorb punishment, keep pressing forward, and force a war no matter how exhausting or brutal it became. There was no panic in him, at no visible surrender, no sign that he was searching for a way out. And for the man across the ring, that can be mentally crushing. Because boxing is not just about landing punches, it is about breaking confidence. When your opponent refuses to break, doubt starts to grow inside you instead. That was Joe Frazier's psychological edge. He made fighters feel like they had to be perfect for every second, while he only needed one opening to change the fight. He carried himself like a man who expected suffering and accepted it. That kind of mentality is rare. It cannot be taught easily, and it cannot be faked under pressure. Joe Frazier was terrifying because his spirit matched his style. Relentless, fearless, and impossible to discourage. When boxing legends spoke about Joe Frazier, they did not describe him like an ordinary champion. They spoke about him like a force of nature, a man whose presence in the ring could turn discipline into fear. That is what makes Frazier's reputation so powerful even decades later. Great fighters understood that his danger was not built on hype. It was built on experience. They knew what it meant to share a ring with someone who kept advancing, kept punching, and kept believing no matter what happened. What made those opinions so important was that they came from men who were not easily impressed. These were fighters who had seen power, speed, skill, and intimidation at the highest level. Yet Joe Frazier still stood out. Why? Because his kind of pressure was deeply personal. He did not just challenge your technique, he challenged your courage. He forced men to answer the hardest question in boxing. What do you do when someone refuses to stop? That is why the word terrifying fits him so well. Legends respected his toughness, feared his hook, and admired his willingness to suffer in order to win. They saw something in Joe Frazier that every true fighter recognizes immediately: authenticity. No act, no excuses, no backing up, just relentless violence, discipline, and heart. In a sport full of dangerous men, Joe Frazier earned a reputation that even the greatest voices in boxing still speak about with a different kind of